Miss Paget, I'm gonna mute you on our end just so we don't get any background noise. But whenever you want to speak, if you want to speak, just hit unmute on your end.
Okay.
Hi, we'll go ahead and start. I call a meeting to order. 7:30 and we have a quorum. Planning Commission members, so we'll go ahead and get the meeting started. We have a lot on our agenda this evening. Gonna have the quorum. What's your pleasure on the minutes of the last meeting, February 28th?
Make a motion to pass approval.
There a second? Second. Any more discussion? All in favor, making known by saying aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I don't know of any old business other than the zoning committee did meet. We'll probably have something in a couple months, bring before y'all. On the, I guess we brought it up last time. Moving to new business, we have 5 things to cover. First one we'll do is conditional zoning for Royal Langford. Holly, you want to talk?
Yes. Okay, first request for tonight is a conditional rezoning of 3.7 acres of land from A5 agricultural to M2 industrial. This property is located at the intersection of Route 681 West Craigsville Road and Huntington Church Lane. It's located in the rural preservation area of the comprehensive plan. Mr. Langford's requesting to conditionally rezone this parcel to reestablish the concrete plant that used to be on the property. Some of you may recall, back in the 80s, the last record we have was 1986. This property was already in zoned industrial. It's unclear when it was zoned back to A5, so this use has taken place here before. Currently, there is a dwelling on the property, but if this conditional rezoning is approved, Mr. Langford will do a boundary line adjustment to move the dwelling off the property because you can't have residential uses in industrial areas. Mr. Langford's offered the following voluntary proffers. The hours of operation will be from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The operation will remain at least 100 feet from all property lines. He will comply with all DEQ and EPA regulations, and the use will be limited to a maximum of 1.5 acres of the parcel. The zoning ordinance states that M2 is incompatible with residential uses, and M2 shouldn't be allowed to locate anywhere adjacent to residential. However, Mr. Langford's property lies on the line between the A5 zoning district and the RR3 zoning district. And with the exception of 2 parcels, Mr. Langford owns all of these surrounding parcels.
Any questions? Well, Holly?
Yeah, isn't there a couple of places that issued 1.5 acres of industry zoning, 1.5 to into the whole 3.7?
So we're gonna rezone the whole thing, but he will only be using 1.5 of it for this.
Okay.
However, that could decrease with just the boundary line adjustment. It will be closer to 1.5 of the site that will actually be used.
Any more questions for Holly before I open up public hearing? All right, I'll open up public hearing on the Mr. Langford's request. All I ask is speak. If you speak, second one speaking, please try not to restate what the first person said or other people said. Appreciate it. Anyone like to speak for or against Mr. Langford? Change. Anyone like to speak? Come forward, state your name, please, and address.
James Farley, 19221 West Crosville Road. I live right across from the proposed property and I support it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak for or against? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any commission members have any other questions? Can I get a motion one way or the other?
Make a motion, we approve it. Send it to the supervisor.
Motion been made. Second, any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to okay it and pass it on to the board of supervisors, make a note by saying aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I seconded that. Okay, at this point, we're gonna veer from the agenda a little bit. We have a guest speaker with us today, Sir Steve Calland. He's the Executive Director of the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center. And he has over 25 years of experience in renewable energy. So he is going to talk for a little bit and give a presentation on general solar, frequently asked questions and more technical things. This is not related to the actual project. He will not be speaking to the project you all are going to hear later. He's just giving general information. So Mr. Calland, if you'd like to.
How are y'all today?
Aye.
First of all, thanks for the invitation. It's always nice to come up to Virginia. I grew up in Salem, went to William and Mary. My wife's from Richmond area. Spent a lot of time in New Kent. So it's nice to come up back and visit folks up here. I have been in the solar business. I run a center down at NC State University that works in solar, wind, and bioenergy. We do hog slime, waste projects, energy efficiency in industrial facilities, lots of different kinds of energy. But lately I've been spending a lot of time in North Carolina, Kentucky, Virginia, South Carolina, talking with planning boards down there, county commissioners up here, boards of supervisors, just kind of giving general information about solar. So do I have a clicker? The slide there. Oh, somebody else can advance one.
I'll be clicking.
Okay. At any rate, it's click. Just a little bit about our center. We've been around since the 80s. I've been there since 2001. I reiterate some of the stuff that I just went through, but we're partially funded by the state of North Carolina, partially funded by federal grants and state grants. Do a lot of different work on different fronts. Go ahead, click. You can click. I'll walk through this as we go. Sometimes I get questions about the solar in this area. You know, this map is kind of useful. It shows the solar difference around the country, and it looks like there's a lot more solar in the Southwest than there is here. But one of the biggest solar users in the world is actually Germany, which is that big blue blob down there in the bottom right corner. You know, solar energy kind of does pretty well with almost any amount of light. It's just a matter of, you know, you can build a little bit more solar if you need a little bit more output from it. It's an intermittent resource, so it's available only when the sun is shining, obviously. Although these days we're starting to see a lot more projects with batteries added to make it available more than just you know, when the sun's out. But you know, the output's pretty predictable, and the weather prediction is getting better and better. You can go ahead. There's a lot of different kinds of solar technologies out there. We're talking primarily today about what they call photovoltaics, which is the solar electric technology shown in the middle there. Every now and then I get questions about, you know, does solar, you know, hurt birds? You know, is it like, you know, that doesn't burn up birds or something? That's usually that solar thermal electric project down in the bottom there. There's one in the right-hand corner called a power tower. It looks like a giant bug zapper, perhaps. We've seen a couple of those projects out in the southwest of the United States, but you got to have a lot of direct sunlight, like in the desert, to use projects like that. So here you're going to more likely see photovoltaics. You may see some houses that have solar water heating systems on them that date back to maybe the 70s or 80s when that was very popular here. Still very popular in other parts of the world, but we don't do a lot of solar water heating here in this region these days. Continue. Along with the solar panels, another big piece of the puzzle are what are called inverters. This is the piece of the project that kind of converts the electricity from the DC electricity that comes when the sunlight hits these panels and makes electricity, flips it to AC, which is the kind of electricity that comes out of your wall of the house. It's, pretty standard technology with solar these days. The one with the red door on it, that's like a residential scale inverter. That big white box down there, that's kind of a utility scale inverter. Come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. It's basically a piece of power electronics that does that work. They're pretty efficient. They have pretty good warranties on them. They don't make much sound. They don't make any sound when the sun's down because there's nothing going on. And so they're a pretty simple piece of power electronic equipment. Continue. This is just a field where a project was starting to go in. You can see these are galvanized steel posts that have been driven into the ground. You can continue. And I'm going to flip through these pretty quick here. These are racking systems. This is what's called a fixed racking system or fixed tilt system. So this is not going to rotate with the sun as it moves over. Fixed tilt systems tend to point south because that's the best solar exposure throughout the day. If you see other systems are called tracking systems where the system actually will tilt as the sun passes overhead, and those will track east to west usually to keep up with the sun. Continue. This is just what project looks like. You can see that this is not what you would call an impervious surface. This is a pervious system. You can see grass down underneath it. In some cases, they will use some gravel between the rows if they've got a lot of rows and they need to get trucks or maintenance vehicles back and forth. But for the most part, these systems can go in with relatively minor impact on the ground that they're surrounding. If the land is relatively flat, you probably won't even see much grading because grading just adds cost for no good reason. And so these projects can have, pretty minimal footprint in terms of their impact on the land that they're going on. Continue. This is a larger system that's in the ground. You can see that there's a small creek that kind of runs through there. And this is one of the nice things about solar projects. You just kind of build around the things in the terrain that are in the way. So, in this particular case, the solar project kind of makes way for that stream and doesn't impinge it. It's, a modular technology is what they call it. You can kind of build it to scale, build to fit a space, whatever it might be. It's, as small as the watch on your wrist, if you had one of those old solar watches back in the 80s, like I did as a kid, or it's as big as, something that fills up, tens or even hundreds of acres. Continue, please. We started getting a lot of questions from local government folks a few years back about solar as it was moving forward. We put together a model ordinance to help give guidance to local government officials when they were trying to figure out how to do zoning. I'll just tell you, this is a resource that's free on our website. You're welcome to look at it. It is now a few years old. So it probably, we've been talking about updating it. And if you move one more slide ahead, we've also done some white papers that kind of looked at a lot of the key issues that people were asking us questions about. White papers is probably a strong term. These are basically literature reviews where we went out and identified kind of academic literature that looked at the different topics, kind of gathered it up, put some citations in there so you can go find it if you want to, and summarize that to answer a bunch of different issues. Some of them on health and human safety issues, and the other ones more on kind of the agricultural land use synergies with solar. By the way, those were done in 2017. We updated the ag one in 2019. We're in the process right now. I've got a couple of grad students that are out doing the literature review for a new update on both white papers, which we should have 6 months from now or so. Continue, please. So some of the topics that we're seeing coming up more frequently these days, the systems are getting larger than they were. In North Carolina, we were actually the #2 solar state in the country behind California for a couple of years. We're still in the top 5 or 10. So we've got a lot of solar on the ground in North Carolina. In the early days, a lot of these systems were, around 50 to 70 acre systems. Nowadays, the systems are somewhat larger than this. And so the issues are shifting a little bit. That's largely originally it was driven by public policy in the state of North Carolina that kind of favored systems in that scale. They changed the rules in 2017. And so now what we're seeing is that the economies of scale helping to drive down the price of solar is what's really driving the equation. And we're seeing larger systems. Probably the topic I've gotten the most questions about in the last couple of years is around decommissioning and how to deal with decommissioning of projects. In a lot of ways, these are, questions that have to get kind of sorted out at the local level. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked and there's, reasonable answers to all of them. And so it's just a matter of, like any other permitting process, what is the goal that you're trying to achieve as a community? So we can dig into that a little bit. Probably the newest topic that's just starting to come up is the subject of batteries. We're seeing battery prices falling like a stone right now. setting aside maybe the last 6 months as we've started to see supply chain issues coming out of COVID. But battery prices have been dropping rapidly, partially due to solar, but really more because of all the electric vehicles. If you were like me and watched the Super Bowl this year, you saw that every car commercial out there was about an electric car of some sort. They're making batteries for those electric cars, and a lot of the batteries that are going into electric cars are basically the same ones that they use for these kinds of projects on solar, just more of them stacked differently. So the more batteries we build, it's the old Henry Ford thing. The more you build, the cheaper they get, and that's kind of what's going on. And so we will probably see more batteries, in 4 or 5 years. They'll probably be pretty common with solar projects as they get installed because it makes the solar that much more friendly. Continue. So one question I get a lot is, do solar panels have any kind of toxicity associated with them? Do they leach, chemicals into the groundwater? And the answer is no, they don't. Solar panels, I can pretty much unilaterally say, have no real toxicity characteristics that are going to affect the soil. There is a test that the Environmental Protection Agency, the feds, have called the TCLIP test. It's the Toxicity Characteristic Leaching Protocol test. That test is designed to test products that are going to be landfilled and to kind of examine them to see what kind of impact they have in kind of a simulated landfill process. They basically take the material and break it into small pieces to simulate it being thrown into a landfill. Then they throw it in an acid bath and simulate 20 years sitting in the landfill, and then they see what comes out. With solar panels, you really don't have an issue with that. We have seen in some particularly old solar panels, if you go back 30 years or so, solar panels from that vintage, there was a lot more lead solder used in those panels. And so we did see just traces of lead in some of those, but not significant traces, but enough that it would have triggered some kind of regulatory action. That said, these days, there's very much less lead in almost all panels, and actually they're trying to phase it out entirely as a soldering technique right now. So the Europeans have basically put rules in place that are going to force lead solder completely out of solar panels in a few years, and most of the industry is moving that direction. Cadmium Telluride panels, there's one company that's a U.S. company that makes these panels that are made of different material, cadmium Telluride. Most solar panels are made from silicon. It's basically sand. But, cadmium Telluride is a different material. It's used to make thin film modules, a certain specific type of solar panel. People worry about cadmium when they hear that word. Cadmium itself is a toxic material, but cadmium Telluride is a fairly stable compound. I tell people it's kind of like being worried about getting chlorine poisoning from salt. Salt is, sodium and chlorine bonded together. Cadmium Telluride, same kind of thing. And so in a module, it's very inert. There's certainly no site contamination issues associated with cadmium Telluride panels. And there's really not even any kind of problem anticipated in a landfill. Although I will say that most cadmium Telluride panels, First Solar, the company, works hard to try and make sure that those panels are recycled because the cheapest source of cadmium Telluride for them is old cadmium Telluride panels. So we see a lot of that focus. Something that's come up in more recent times that we've run into is this discussion of PFAS and PFAF compounds. These are chemical compounds that, there's been some recent concern at the Environmental Protection Agency. Basically, as near as I can tell from digging through literature that's out there, and there is very little scientific literature that kind of does this test, but basically there was a subsidiary of a company that makes the PFAS compounds, and they're used commonly in things that are water resistant, the Vortex, umbrellas, things of that nature. They're also found in firefighting foams. If you've got a firefighting foam, you'll find them in that. They're unfortunately very common in the environment right now because they were completely unregulated until just recently. The reality is that, there was a company that was making those chemicals, and they, in North Carolina, at least where this came up, that company had no regulations that told them they couldn't just basically dump it into the Cape Fear River, all their waste products. So we have a lot of PFAS contamination in the eastern part of the state. It has nothing to do with solar other than a different subsidiary of the same company was making a material that was used in solar panels 50 miles up the road at a different facility. And so somebody kind of said, oh, well, this company's doing this and this company's doing this, and they're both in the same area where there's contamination. You be the judge. That's not exactly what we call scientific method. And so even though there were some articles that got published on this, I've found nothing that says there's any scientific linkage between the two. I've also had conversations with engineering folks at NC State about this, and they felt that it was so silly that they didn't even want to do field testing on it because they thought it was kind of a ridiculous question. So I've got some grad students, we're going to do it anyway, but to date, there's no scientific evidence that links those pieces. Along with the PV modules, people asked about inverters and transformers. The inverters are usually built to it's actually a German standard, but German standard for toxicity issues. There's no issues associated with the power electronics. Transformers, if you'll recall, many years ago, there were some concerns about PCBs, associated with transformer production. That's all been phased out probably 3 decades ago now, though. All the transformers use non-toxic minerals and vegetable oils at this point, so there's really no issues with transformers either. So toxicity is a little bit of a red herring. You see a little bit about it on the internet, but it's really not a concern with regard to solar panels. Continue. Another one that's a little bit of a red herring is electromagnetic fields or different radiation concerns. People hear about this and they worry about it. There was also a lot of concern a few years back about transmission lines in electromagnetic fields. A whole lot of scientific work went into looking at this issue. And there was really no linkage, between transmission lines and EMF that was causing any problems in the field. There is a little bit of EMF associated with solar projects. In general, there's EMFs everywhere in life. There are electromagnetic fields everywhere. There's kind of a base level of electromagnetic field that is commonly found everywhere in the environment. With a solar project of scale, you'll find a little bit of an elevated EMF level kind of between actually the inverter and the transformer. So I wouldn't necessarily want to stand there, for 6 months or something without lead-lined underwear perhaps. But in general, there's no real issue with EMF. And certainly solar projects have a fence around them as part of the National Electric Code. By the time you reach the fence line, any electromagnetic fields associated with solar project are dissipated to background levels. So there's really no issue with EMF for solar projects. Continue. Ag impacts. Another issue that I hear a lot of concern about is runoff associated with topsoil. Again, if you do a lot of grading, which we occasionally see in the mountains and other areas that are a little bit more, challenging to site projects in, you have to follow the rules associated with that. All of these projects are subject to state permitting for water issues. And so if you go through the regulatory process and you've dealt with your runoff issues, then, it's just like any other construction project. Compaction is something that can be a concern, but for the most part, there's very little of any kind of asphalt. There's usually a concrete pad or two for the inverters and the transformers, but if there's any kind of, paths built on the project, they're usually done with gravel or just left as dirt, depending. It's just added cost that most solar projects don't need to go to the expense of adding in anything other than that. Questions that I do get about, materials that leak into the ground. The one thing that I will say, so you do get some zinc and aluminum associated with galvanized steel. And that's true if it's a galvanized steel roof on a shed or any other kind of galvanized steel. For the most part, zinc is, not going to be a terribly big deal. There's a lot of zinc already in the environment, and so it's not much to worry about. On the aluminum side, the only real issue that I've found in talking with the crops folks at NC State about this was that peanut crops tend to be pretty sensitive to to zinc levels, not item reverse. Aluminum, there's plenty in the environment. Zinc can be an issue for peanuts if you're growing peanuts. So I can't remember, is this a peanut county?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably not an issue. And things like soil for the crops after the solar would be removed 25, 30 years down the road. Got issues, it's a piece of soil that hasn't been maintained for agricultural purposes, but it's nothing that's insurmountable. There are ways to deal with the soil to return it to being useful for crops if necessary. Continue, please. We talked a little bit about the impervious surface discussion. I've seen people that are, interested in being concerned about groundwater runoff issues associated with solar. It's just like any other thing. In fact, it's a lot easier to deal with than, say, a parking lot at Walmart or something. Parking lots are impervious surfaces. Solar projects are pervious. And so the water can kind of fit down in between the panels. And as long as there's not pavement, which there shouldn't be, the water, can kind of be dealt with. But if there's a significant amount of solar panels, it may have some effect, and that's going to get dealt with by the state permitting process in terms of, what needs to get done. Continue. We talked a little bit about decommissioning. Like I said, I get a lot of questions about this. There's a lot of different ways of handling this. I've seen everything from, proposals that would pretty much chase away solar projects, give me a 30-year bond for the entire amount that it would cost to remove the project with no credit towards recycling any of the materials, and I'd like it all on day one. Well, that probably means that you're not going to get a lot of solar projects in your county. I've seen, the other end of the spectrum where they basically say, it's personal property rights, do what you want to do, and we'll deal with it when the time comes. And, this is one of those things where the county has to decide what it thinks makes the most sense. There's, like I said, a wide range of options in there. Happy to answer questions on what I've seen and what I think might make some sense, but a lot online and a lot on our website where we could talk about that. Continue. I get a lot of questions about recycling of solar panels. Solar panels are pretty recyclable. You can get almost all of them recycled as long as you've got a recycling center that handles all of it. Right now, the common thing is about 70% of a panel would get recycled if you were to take it, and it's going to mostly be the aluminum frame, the copper wire associated with it, and the glass. And they'll be able to take that and recycle it pretty easily. And then the rest of the materials, the silicon and some of the plastics and things, probably not going to get recycled today. That said, there are advanced recycling centers that are in Europe, and there's a couple here in the United States now that are evolving, which can recycle as much as 96% of solar panels, maybe a little bit more now. And I think that, my general belief on this is that, we don't have enough solar panels coming out the back end yet. Solar panels have a lifespan of 25 to 30 years. And so, most of these panels that, went in the early days, are still looking at another 10 to 15 years before they're going to hit the end of their lifespan. As we start to get to the end of that period and we start seeing panels getting retired in places, market forces will take over and the market will evolve, and we'll have, recycling centers that evolve to do this. But it's a lot like recycling stereo equipment or other types of electronics. It's a lot of the same materials. Continue, please. Battery storage, this is, I alluded to the fact that battery prices are coming down and we're seeing more of them. I think that batteries are going to be a big boon to the solar industry and to the wind industry as well. Another technology that makes energy but is kind of intermittent with the weather. It's going to make, something that's available 25% of the time or 20% of the time, it's going to make it available 50% of the time or 60% of the time. And that's going to make a big difference in how useful solar and wind is. But that said, batteries have their own issues and they're very different than solar panels. We will be able to recycle them, right? Today, we already recycle lead acid batteries out of cars all the time. It's a different process to recycle. A lot of these are what we call lithium ion batteries, different chemistry. But that recycling is starting to evolve. I just saw an announcement earlier today, as a matter of fact, that there's a new lithium ion recycling center going up in New York State where they're doing a lot of battery work. So my guess is that, again, as the market moves forward, we'll see more of the battery recycling infrastructure move in place. One more. I also hear a lot of people talk about solar being an industrial land use. It's kind of weird. So I sit on the Zoning Board of Adjustment in Cary, North Carolina, and I kind of have some sense of how you guys think about these things. Solar is not really an industrial land use. It doesn't require a bunch of water. It doesn't require on-site personnel to be there all the time. It doesn't require, specific infrastructure beyond some power lines. But it's not exactly what you would call farmland either. And so a lot of times solar projects that are being installed on farmland, that farmland might be taxed at a farm rate that's a discount for the county, through the county. And so when the solar goes on, it comes out of whatever the agricultural tax rate is, and the property tax rate on the property goes up because the solar's there. It's kind of a weird space in the middle. So, I would say, treat it as appropriate given its characteristics. Don't overkill it, don't underkill it, for what it's worth. One more. Also had some questions about neighboring property values. This is another one of the areas where there's not a huge amount of data, but we're starting to see more of it. People that are in the business that do kind of matched pair studies have looked at this, and what they have found is that there doesn't seem to be much impact to farmland that borders solar farms. In fact, if there's any example or any impact, it seems that the farmland value might actually go up a little bit because it may become that maybe some of the infrastructure that comes to that area makes the farmland next door valuable as well. With the residential properties that border a project, there's, again, very limited data available. It may be that there's a small decrease in property values associated with that, and you would think that it has a lot to do with how the project is screened and, how exactly close is the property to it. I would think you use a little common sense. If the project's screened and you can't really see it from the neighboring property, it's probably not going to make a big deal. As we talked about in the human health section, there's really not a lot of issues associated with the solar, but it's an aesthetic thing. And if you grew up in a rural part of the state and you're not used to looking at it, it may have an impact on your perception of life. That's kind of, the balance of it. And you got to balance that against the individual property rights of the owners and a whole lot of other things. And that's why you guys get the big bucks here on the planning board, right?
Yeah.
So that's just a quick overview of topics. I will tell you that that's an abbreviated version of something that I can do for about 2.5 hours if you want. So just let me know if you need me to come back and bore you to tears. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I'll stick around to the end of the meeting tonight in case anything comes up.
Thank you. Any commission members have any questions?
I'd just like to say that, the pictures that you showed, on level ground in the Piedmont, that's not really representative of, one's going in 2 miles from me. And there's a lot of soil disturbance. It looks like it was. Is that right? And so, the concern, the longer term concern is when cut and fill is used and the topsoil is pushed into the lower high ground, pushed into the low ground and covered over. And it takes 100 years to build 1 inch of topsoil. So there's no question that it's really more appropriate to have solar in the coastal plain and as compared to the Piedmont. And of course, in the mountains, that would have to be quite difficult.
Sure. I guess what I'd say is there are plenty of examples of projects where the project is built in conformance with the land. There's nothing about solar because the pieces are all modular. You can build it without doing that kind of grading, especially in a place like the Piedmont where you've got some gentle roll perhaps, but you're not talking about large mountains. But we see solar projects out in the mountains as well, and it's really just a matter of trying to site them so that they've got the right exposure. Now, that said, I'm not going to say that there's no grading that ever takes place with these projects. If there are companies that choose to do that, again, that should be done according to state regulations and make sure that they're in compliance with any kind of issues that would come out of the regulatory process. So I would encourage you guys to make sure that if you're not happy with the way the state regs work on that, you should talk to the state about what you can do on top of that. But in general, these kinds of projects can be done in a way that is pretty sensitive to the land that are going on in a place like the beach.
Do you see a higher acreage of them in timberland as compared to open land? Or I guess it just depends. Open land, you go in there, they don't have to do anything. Go out there and stick them in, save a lot of money. But the timber, I have one behind me that they clear cut it, then you had to grade it, then they run into rock.
Yeah.
So they couldn't get the aluminum poles in there. So now they're pecking holes in there to get the poles in. But
it used to be that the primary driver on these projects was proximity to transmission lines.
yeah,
So whether it was agricultural land or it was marginal land or it was forestry land, depending on the scale of the project, the bigger the project, the more room they've got to maneuver in terms of, other types of costs. But we would see projects go in, based on proximity to transmission lines or, 3-phase distribution lines. As the projects have gotten bigger, they've actually been able to build, some of their own transmission or substations or what have you, depending on the scale of the project. And so that's less of a driver. I am seeing more projects going in on forest land, particularly, managed forest lands. Wirehouses do a good bit, for example. So those kinds of projects are out there. I also see a lot of projects that go in on, what I would characterize as prime farmland by USDA definition. If I had my druthers, we'd be doing it all on marginal lands, but, the driver in this is in a lot of cases the economics. And, it's kind of the same conversation. If the property owner wants to do something, then you'll have to talk to them about that part of it. But in general, the economics are driven by, the scale of the project, the availability of contiguous land, the availability of transmission and distribution infrastructure in the vicinity.
What is your closest recyclable place to here?
So again, for traditional recycler, for kind of current level of recycling, the 70% level, there's, I don't know about up here in Virginia because I haven't looked, but there's 3 or 4 places in North Carolina. There's one in South Carolina that's fairly close to the southeastern part of North Carolina's border. It's not real complicated to strip the aluminum or the frame off and pull the wires and scrape the glass. To get that advanced recycling that we're talking about, there's, like I said, there's a couple of places that are looking at it right now in the US. There's a whole lot of it in Europe because it's kind of the way the regulatory framework's gone there. And I would expect that as we get closer to end of life for the larger number of panels, we'll see more of that here. But, there's a Virginia Recycling Association. It does, like electronics recycling. You probably ask them, they could probably tell you who in this vicinity would do it.
Anyone else have any questions?
How does inflation account into the price of decommissioning? It might cost 16 billion this year, but what about 30 years from now?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways of getting at that. The way that I've seen that, what do I know? But, I'm a university guy, not a business guy. But in general, the way that I've seen that makes me happiest, required decommissioning plan that gets filed with the county so that there's a plan for how it's done. As a part of that plan, you can have an engineer give you some kind of statement as to what it costs to clear it off the site. And you can also get some kind of sense as to what the recycled value of materials are based on market value today. Then you require that plan to be updated on a schedule. Maybe once every 5 years, whoever the owner of the project is has to refile with the county an updated version of that plan with updated numbers in it. And the way I've seen it done in cases where there was concern about it is they said basically deduct the recycled value from the value of removal, and you have to have a bond for the difference. I've seen other plans that are more aggressive than that. I've seen other plans that are less aggressive than that. But that seems to give fair market value to the recycled material. It doesn't put an overly strong burden on the company to be, in charge of doing the decommissioning, but leaves the county with some kind of, at least there's an indication as to how it happens. I've seen other people say nobody makes Walmart come up with a decommissioning bond when they, think of Walmart. Although I don't actually see a lot of Walmarts go out of business either, so I'm not that worried. But it's all a matter of perspective and how the county wants to address it. But I've seen a lot of different plans that kind of run the gamut on that. That's probably the best answer I've got for you on how to deal with that over time.
Are there companies that actually take them down? I'm sure the solar companies that put them in probably aren't set up to dispose of them.
In some cases there are. For example, I mentioned First Solar. They actually do recycling of their own product. And so if you're taking their product off, they want you to send it back to them. But, in general, it's just like a construction project. It's just, panels bolted to racks stuck in the ground. And so it's really not that you get the same guy that does the post hole, to drive the posts in and has another piece of equipment that pulls the posts back out. It's not that complicated, and there's really not that many, pieces that would be unusual. For the most part, that could go to a landfill. I think the issue is that, work in the world of solar, the last thing you want to do is put stuff into a landfill. So trying to encourage recycling is something that I always do. But there's really nothing here that's particularly, dangerous or harmful. And so it's pretty easy in terms of disposal.
Have they ever put solar panels on landfills?
In fact, they have. There are a number of projects. In fact, there's some incentives in certain states, including, I want to say here in Virginia, for brownfield redevelopment. I'm not as familiar with the rules here in Virginia, but what you see is sometimes if somebody is looking to do a smaller project, particularly a lot of times you'll see a local government that wants to do what we call a community solar project, maybe to benefit lower income folks, and that locality has its own utility. So Salem, for example, is a municipal utility, right? So they could put solar on a landfill there and maybe get a benefit from the state, from the brownfields fund to help buy down the cost of that solar, which makes that smaller project that might not be as cost effective otherwise a little bit closer to cost effective.
Anyone else have any questions? I don't ask all of them.
So in the event like normal power generation stop for some reason, like the normal power usually comes from, but the power lines are still in place. Would a solar panel backfeed to a general local area?
No, that was always a concern from electric utilities dating back to the era when we had small systems. Well, we still have small systems on rooftops, but that's where the concern came from, was that line workers could theoretically be at risk if solar panels started backfeeding into the grid during an outage when somebody was trying to fix it. So the way that inverters are built, the default fail, but they're designed to do this, but if there was a fail, they default in a way that disconnects them from the grid. And so they're kind of a fail-safe mechanism to make sure that you don't have in the case of a loss of power, the solar project can't backfeed into the grid. Now, there are some projects today where we're starting to see people have a small isolated grid where the solar, if the main grid goes down, you might have a small grid that includes like the fire station and, a couple of buildings or something. And it's powered by what we call a microgrid with maybe with batteries added in so that they've got some storage in case there's a long period that the power's out. And so that's becoming a conversation that we're seeing in more and more places. But a big project, a big utility scale project, those are designed to basically, they'll drop off the grid if the grid goes out.
Any more questions? Appreciate your presentation.
Glad to do
A
it.
lot of information.
Anything else I can answer, feel free to reach out. She's got my card, so you can reach out to me and be glad to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You want to present the next project?
Amelia Energy Facility LLC is requesting a special exception permit to establish a utility scale solar array on 5 parcels. The total combined acreage of all the parcels is 1,103 acres, but of that number, panels will be placed on approximately 600 acres. The rest of the land will be used to achieve a landscape buffer and meet the required setbacks. Since the December meeting, when the initial application for this project was considered by you all, the applicants have made several changes to the proposal based on the feedback that they received. 7 parcels have been removed from the project, and removal of these parcels has almost completely eliminated the cropland that was initially being converted to panels. The parcels in this proposal are largely forested, and the majority of the non-forested land is lying near Buckskin Creek Road. In addition, the project's been pulled back off of Poorhouse Road, West Creek Road, and Dennisville Road. There will be limited visibility on West Creek and Buckskin Creek, and likely no visibility from Dennisville, Poorhouse, and Old Courthouse Road. The same 13 conditions will apply, and the applicants are still requesting an amendment to condition 5 that states interior side setbacks be lifted. In addition to the 13 standard conditions dictated by the ordinance, I would like to propose adding 2 additional conditions. One, that there shall be no battery storage permitted, and that the maximum acreage under panels shall not exceed 650 acres. So that's all I have, but if you all have any questions, I'm happy to field those. We also have Weston Sam here for Torch Clean, who I'm sure can answer questions as well.
Any commission members have questions before I open up the public hearing?
In the report we got this month, it mentions different megawatt hours produced. I see 180 megawatts, 106 megawatts, and mentions 41,000 homes. The previous plan mentioned a similar amount of homes, even though it's like almost half the size. I was curious on those numbers.
Holly, can we, the buffer first to get our slides up?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and pull this up right.
Can you do a quick intro?
It's all yours.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for my present. My name is Scott Beach. I'm the Senior Vice President for Clean Energy. Headquarters is in Colorado. I flew in this morning to present to you all. This is a very important project for the company. We have a large presence here in Virginia, and we think that, being part of this community and entering into this community is important to us. So I wanted to make the effort to come out here and answer any questions you might have for us as a company or support Sam and Wes here as you consider this project. Parcels has been around since the mid 2000s. The utility scale renewable energy projects were actually originally part of our oil and gas company based out of Texas. And kind of like the ugly stepchild of that company, but eventually kind of took ourselves out on our own and started doing a lot of energy development in the Southwest, and then slowly broadened our reach out across the country. We now quite a large presence across the United States. We have an office here in Virginia. We have an office in Colorado. We have a number of projects here in Virginia that we're developing, and those are just about to start construction on the first wave of them here in the state. And then we also have another set of projects in the Midwest and also our presence in the Southwest. And they all take kind of the same form. There's often we're the first project of this type to come into the local community. There's a lot of conversation about our project entering into the community and how we can integrate into being a member of the community. And one of the things that we find is really important, which we've tried to approach here with you all, is having a long runway in how we can approach these projects. Your feedback on your concerns on what the footprint of the project looks like, and then listening to what those concerns are, going back to the drawing board, adjusting a project, and then re-presenting it like we are tonight, based on some of those initial concerns that we discussed. I will say that there's a lot of different companies out there that are doing solar projects in Virginia, and they all have a little bit of a different form. Some of them, this is the fine side. Some of them are just doing the front end development work. They'll come in and they'll say, hey, we're going to develop a project, and in 6 months we're going to sell it. And thanks for doing business. We actually don't take that approach. We both do the front end development work of the project, but we also maintain a long-term ownership position of that project. So often the conversations that we're having today and tonight over the course of the next couple of months and the next year or two while the project is being built are the same ones that we have to live with throughout the entire life of that project. And that is often we have to have partner conversations right now because we can only agree to so much today because we know that we have to live with any agreement that we have. In the same way that Scott Timber has been here for a really long time in the community, we also want to be here for a very long time in the community. And as kind of a lessee of their property, we're also going to be a resident here in the community, contributing to the tax base, and also just being part of the community. The commitments that we make as part of our agreement to have a special use here are ones that we have to live with, right? If we say that we're going to do something and then we don't do it, 5 years down the road, the decommissioning bond is a good example. If we don't give you that bond, well, then you guys can revoke our status. And that's a really, really big problem for us, right? And so it's important that we have kind of a conversation now of what we can agree to and what we can commit to, because ultimately those commitments last a really long time, 30, 40 years. So Torch's expertise really is in all of the work leading up into the construction of these projects and then through the construction management of the project itself, and then into the ownership side of the project. You go to the next slide. Steve kind of hit a lot on this stuff, but kind of the solar 101 on what we are here to talk about is really a converted guardrail technology is what we use. You pound a post into the ground, and in places where there is bedrock, yes, sometimes you'll pull that post out and you'll have to drill something in there. You use worst case, a concrete slurry to make that post stay in place. But whenever we do that, that is a cost to us. And so what we would much rather prefer is to drive that post just straight into the ground. without any kind of concrete or any asphalt at all for the project. And if you kind of look at how these are built, as the previous presentation alluded to, it's basically copper and steel is what the bulk of the project is designed out of. And so there's a salvage value associated with that. And we've kind of hit already tonight on this idea of recycling this material. And the bulk of that recycling is going to be the steel and copper that is associated with the project. Those are all kind of just pure commodities that would then be recycled. And, one of the things about solar panels that we hear a lot and that we strongly believe in is that we don't really think there's no evidence to point to a 35-year-old solar panel just not working anymore. It actually does work. The stuff up in space still works. And so we see the primary reuse of these projects not necessarily being recycled, but actually being reused. And so even if you have a project that is half as efficient as it once was when you put it in, originally into the ground, that still is producing electricity. And there is a secondary market to those panels that could either be given to someone for free, or they might even be willing to pay a price for those. And then ultimately, as it was alluded to earlier, this project is all modular. It'll be stepped up into the inverters and transformers in the bottom right-hand picture. And the internal distribution of this project will be a distribution voltage of 34.5 kilovolts, which is kind of an important voltage for everyone to kind of reference, because that's the same voltage that we have all throughout the neighborhood here. That's kind of our internal distribution electricity system throughout the country. And then it'll all go to a central point right by the transmission system, by the transmission lines on the property, and then stepped up to the appropriate voltage and put out to the system. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions about Torch or for me, and then Sam's going to jump up and talk.
Is that gonna be like a substation when it boosts up
There will be a substation, yes, sir.
on this project?
Yes,
No batteries, just it's coming in, the substation builds up.
that's right.
What percentage of copper to steel in the panels?
No, the steel is really the post
The post,
itself,
okay.
and the copper is the internal wire.
Okay, so how much?
I honestly don't know what the ratio is to, pounds of steel and pounds of copper. I think that, I would guess that's in our decommissioning report. We can kind of pull up that information. But when you look into that exhibit A in the application, all those recycling numbers, they break that down.
How deep are they putting those?
It's all based on the geotech, but they'll be somewhere between, 5 to 7 feet is usually what they do. And then they're about 5 to 6 feet above the ground. And then kind of getting back to the grading question from before, I mean, if you have kind of a rolling field, what you'd want to do is you have basically a flat line that goes straight across. So kind of in the kind of the lower area of that terrain, that might be a 7-foot post, but then higher up, it might be a 6-foot post, and then a 5-foot post, and then it'll be a straight line right across. And the project that we're about to break ground on this summer up outside of Winchester, that technology actually can support a 17% grade. And so it's got some kind of little torques in it that allows it to adjust with that. Because like what was mentioned earlier is that we really don't want to grade anything because that's increased cost on our firm. And then, a big focus on ours is making sure that ground cover is established and make sure that we deal with any stormwater types of issues. And so the more ground cover we have and the less grading we have, the better it is for that.
Any more?
On the introduction, I'd asked about the report we got today was 621,000 homes, and the report we got back from November of last year has a same 21,000 homes. I was curious, how is it the same? It's like almost
It's large. Scott can take it. Yeah. I'll let Scott go to that. Any other questions on torch? And
Not right now.
right here. Excellent. Good evening, good to see you all again. My name is Sam DeLand, Development Manager of Torch, based out of Charlottesville. I just wanted to start by saying there are, very limited places where you can construct and connect a big solar project. In Amelia, there's really one transmission line, and it feeds the Jetersville substation. And I guess about 6 years ago, they extended it to Pond. And, most of the county is supplied by the Southside Electric Co-op. This is the one transmission line that's owned by Dominion. So just to frame it, this is not couldn't do this type of project anywhere in the county. And I think Amelia, you're fairly limited in being able to do that, given that there's one of these lines. Holly, go to the next slide. So I think it was about 3 months ago that we presented to you all, and we received some feedback, and I think there were two kinds of feedback. There were concerns from some of the neighbors, who had built homes or had homes neighboring the project, and were concerned about the view and the effects on their property. And there were some concerns about cropland and effects on cropland and solar panels replacing that use. And what we've done is change the project pretty significantly. When we first came to you, we had a lot of land to the east on West Creek in Dennisville, and some land to the north on Courthouse Road. We've removed a lot of that land. I think what you see here, there's almost no cropland. If you look in the southwest, there's an open field. I think that's just a grass field that has not been consistently used for crops. But if you look at our boundaries now, everything is to the south of that transmission line. That's kind of our northern boundary. Our eastern boundary is that wetland feature, which is Tanner Branch. That's about a quarter mile off West Creek Road. And then on the west side, we're not going all the way to Buckskin Creek. We're going to be on the east side of that creek that comes in. So that's, over 1,000 feet. So what you're left with is a pretty isolated site. We're, I think, 1,200 feet from any road, 1,000 feet from any house. But it's a very good site for us. These are some pretty, large contiguous areas of pretty flat land. What you're seeing here is a maximum of 630 fenced-in acres. I think realistically, we're going to end up with probably about 500 acres, maybe a little bit less than that. And Travis, to answer your question, the project size has not changed. I think we still will be building a project between 86 and 106 megawatts. And even when we first came to you, we were looking at, in the neighborhood of 700 acres. So I think the total acreage was much bigger, but that included a lot of land that we were not going to use. What we have here is a site that can support a project of the same size, but we added a little bit of land, and I think it can be built more efficiently. I'll give you to the next slide. I think we have the layout. So this doesn't look a whole lot different. But this is a preliminary layout of the solar panels. If you look in the north, kind of the northern part of this, you do see two boxes, which are places where we would connect to the grid. And that would be a substation similar to what you have on, I think it's on Dennisville Road. That's generally built. There's a piece that would be owned by Dominion that's built in the transmission easement. That's called a switch yard. And the project would build a step-up substation. So we would step the voltage up to the voltage of that transmission line. So if you look at this layout, you have these rows of solar panels. The internal project wiring would all run to that point of interconnection. which is on that, right next to that transmission line. On this, the main access would come from West Creek Road. And in terms of the construction process, this would be, around 15 months. There would be a site prep phase where you're removing the stumps and seeding the ground. From there, you go to putting in the foundations and putting in the posts. Following that, you're doing the mechanical and electrical install. And the work with Dominion kind of spans all of that because you want to get all of that work done and then be able to bring down the line in a very short period of time at the end of construction to when you're actually connecting the project. I'll go to the next slide. I wanted to speak a little bit about the benefits to the county. And there was a recent law in Virginia that allows solar projects to offer what's called a siting agreement. And that allows us to offer additional compensation in addition to property taxes. We will be doing that on this project. And over the life of the project, this would pay in the neighborhood of $10 million. About $1 million of that would come during construction and in the first year. And I would add that, a lot of taxpayers are imposing costs, using power, using the roads, using the water, the schools. I think with a solar project, this is something that has almost no cost to the county. And is a passive use. Once it's up and running, you have, 2 or 3 trips a month to the project to make sure it's working okay. So it would, make a meaningful contribution to the county without a real cost. There are construction jobs and a lot of the site work. A lot of the work in building these projects is not solar specific. There's the site work, the access roads, the fencing. We work with local vendors on a lot of that stuff, and it's certainly something we would like to do here. And then I think the first presentation, hit on this, but this is not a, mass paving of a lot of land. When you look at it, solar farms are very large meadows, and, have consistent grass cover. We've grazed sheep on other projects that we're maintaining. You can also grow pollinator-friendly things that would not normally be in a crop field, and that can benefit farmland around it. And that's something we would certainly like to do here. And Holly, go to the next one, just this diagram again. But thanks again for letting us speak and for letting me speak to you all again. We've certainly heard your feedback and made some changes here. To hear any questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Did you all use a lot of local vendors? So there's local people, but there's the one next to you over there.
Yeah, Texas, Louisiana, South Carolina. The ones right now, according to the license plates on the trucks now, I don't know about the truckers coming in on my road, but I just know from those. It's hard to, we don't have any around here we don't have anybody in the county that does much dozing. He does a lot of land. But I'm sure some of the forestry people, I'm not sure who does that for them, forestry planting, but I do know the ones that next to me, it's out of state from what Louis talked to them. But I do see them going down the road every day.
Can I address that thing? Because it's a really important one. And, I think across the entire country, we're seeing a really challenging employee situation. And just in general, we have projects, we have 5 active projects happening in the country. And we have made a concerted effort to try and hire locally a job carrier every single week. And we have people showing up on site and then 3 days later, they're leaving. And so what has happened is that there are people who want to work and they're coming in from all over the place to do the job. And I hope that doesn't happen here because it's way more cost effective for us to be hiring local and getting folks from this area to come in here to do the work. And then trucking them in from wherever and paying them a per diem. So we are 100% aligned with getting people here, but they gotta want to work. So it's a problem that we're seeing across the country.
Yeah, I know, I'm on another board and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Everyone's seeing it, so it's everyone's feeling the pain, so.
And then by the time, it takes some training too. I mean, to run dozers, and it takes training to run all those lines. But any other questions before I open the public hearing?
You said it was 1,000 feet roughly behind any house. That's about as close as you're getting.
Yes, sir.
Is it house or property line?
1,000 feet was the nearest house,
There's house.
and I think if you did the second nearest, it would be at 1,500 feet. Be isolated.
More questions before I open public hearing?
Is this gonna be totally fenced in, even along the creek area?
So if you look at this diagram, this would be, it would be at least 3 different fenced in areas, so we cannot fence over the wetlands. And there are usually pretty good setbacks from those, just, because of the terrain. So, we're not fencing over streams, and that's a kind of natural place for wildlife to pass for the project.
So this backside will be open?
Oh, you have a fence on it.
Okay,
They have to have fence around all the solar panels.
all the solar panels.
Have to have fence around them.
Like the outline of the yellow is an approximation of where the fence would be. But again, this is kind of a max extent. I think when we designed the project, it would probably be pulled in a little bit from there.
Any more?
That fence might have a national electric code requirement, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was 6 foot tall with barbed wire on top, I think. The one next to me's had is.
We prefer to use like a game fence.
Yeah.
We've done that on some projects. We've seen some counties have adopted like Dominion substation requirements. And they put that in the ordinance. So sometimes that's what you're seeing, but I think most of the projects we're building have like a 7 foot, maybe even 8 foot, like deer fence. Like a square fence type thing.
Any more questions before I open the public hearing? Make notes for anybody to speak so we can ask the questions afterwards, all right? I'll now open the public hearing on this application for the solar farm. State your name and address. And try to hold it under 5 minutes or I will cut you off. And try not to repeat too much from the person before, if possible. Joanne, you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. Not to talk about too much paper, but I'll shorten that. Thank you. My name is Joanne Scott Webb. I live at 13225 Chester Landing Drive, Chesterfield, Virginia, 23838. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight for the Bay Energy Project and for renewable energy. Thank you for your time, your interest, and your questions. I've worked on solar development from a landowner's perspective since 2015. The process of study and research the science and technology of renewable energy. Torch first contacted us in 2019. We have almost 3 years in this process, are still working on the option phase, which is one of the first steps. This paperwork just represents the first couple of years of paperwork I have with them. We have a long way to go still. I have a lot of paperwork in the back. I brought in copies. Some of the things were presented tonight, brought in copies of that and lists of sources to go to research solar energy. This is a very detailed process, many challenges. Torch was the first one to contact us, but these same parcels have been notified by a number of developers and a major utility provider, electricity in Virginia. We received some form of communication at least weekly, and today I had 2 letters concerning solar production. I always research the developers. I talk to the principals. I talk with the landowners who these companies have worked with who have completed projects. to talk about how they liked it, what went well, who and what is the financing source. Where will there be a stakeholders ongoing as torch will be? Sometimes the project is totally sold. The location of the site really is very ideal. The importance of the existing transmission easement, few neighborhoods. It is the last property in a very long prescriptive right of way. I want to get off topic here a moment. I feel called to do this. I want to talk about private property rights. The founders of our country and those who worked in the Constitution had it right. Sought to create a government to protect the private rights of Americans to own property. John Adams, our second president, was also the principal author of the oldest written Constitution, which is still in use in the world today. Verbatim, he said, property rights must be secured or liberty does not exist. Private property rights separate us from communist and totalitarian countries. America has enjoyed the highest standard of living in the world since the mid-1770s. Not the highest income, but the higher standard of living. Because America gave us the opportunity and reality of vast lands, abundant natural resources, land, timber, water, rivers, oceans, ores and minerals. Our forefathers fought for freedom and opportunity, and they ran with it. Our president spoke early in his first year of estate taxes, saying that all family farms would have to be sold due to changes in the state tax laws the new administration would implement. I haven't heard this again, but I heard it early on. Since then, our president's been pretty busy with problems domestically and abroad, some of them which we created. It did bother me that farmland was removed from the site we are discussing today. Solar energy production is a positive means for a future in many ways. For farmers, it's an opportunity to keep the family farm together for another generation or two. One of my dad's golden rules, I heard it often, always be good to your neighbors. A solar farm is a good neighbor, a most peaceful and quiet neighbor. March 1st, our president gave the annual State of the Union address. After a year of dramatically rising gas prices, I so hope to hear these three words: drill, baby, drill. Or maybe drill here, drill now. I did not hear any of this, but more about the new Green Deal, which robs Americans of green from their wallets every day. I did not hear about the major energy crisis in America that's hurting all working people. And that's everywhere. Much of the world has banned coal, banned nuclear, and they're buying oil from Russia. We're still buying oil from Russia 3 weeks ago and trying to buy from Iran and Argentina. The Saudis did not take our call. In 2020, the surplus of oil and exporting to the Western world. Track our road diesel prices every day. Our bulk price for 7,000 gallons, November 4th, 2020, is $1.74. February 26, 2021, it was $2.52. Today it was $4.74. But March 9th, it was $5.40. Fortunately, we didn't buy fuel that day. Today on the Fox Business Show, Dagan McDowell, originally from Guardrail, Virginia, reported that on-road diesel fuel prices may lead to worldwide recession. Trucks are critical for moving goods to us and consumers. All of us here have to drive to work with no mass transport. Green energy is possible and advancing rapidly. More panels per acre, less acreage required, improved battery storage, repower the panels, etc. But green energy is not like a light switch you can turn on and off. Green energy policy should be a long-term policy strategy, a 50 to 75-year process at best. I think we're going to need fossil fuels ongoing, but fossil fuels will not last forever. They are limited. I did some research on that. America is the largest coal resource in the world, but it has a reserve of 25 years. As long as we have the sun, we can have solar. America needs every type of energy. More drilling, more fracking, open up the XL pipeline, nuclear, coal, and renewable energy. The current conflict in Ukraine breaks my heart. This is the perfect storm for America and the world. Energy independence equals national security and physical stability. May God bless America. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? State your name and address.
Bobby Parsons, 5892 West Creek Road. First go round, some of these panels are gonna join my property. I understand Ralph Wood has pulled out. But from the back corner of my property to Miss Scott's, see. First thing I want to bring up too, though, this is being proposed as a solar farm, correct?
Solar project. All of them are considered solar farms, but
This right here came out of the last proposal. It's in, I'm sure y'all got it. Farm. This was dated 1997. A parcel of land containing 10 or more acres used for agriculture. It's a solar panel or agricultural product. I don't think so. I think this is more of an industry. He announced it, farm, no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. Farmland's going away right and left. Hey, this is not a farm of no shape or form. It's an industry. And I just can't see it. The other thing I brought up last time too, and this guy said, some of the farm owners want to be good neighbors. Well, good neighbors don't put in something that's going to evaluate another neighbor's property. And that is what this is going to do. I have taken the liberty of talking to a couple of real estate agents, and they pretty much said right off the top, it'll be 7% decrease. And one of these gentlemen made the comment that it would affect, adjoining landowners' homes and property. I've worked all my life, my stuff. I don't appreciate nobody coming in there and gonna do something that's gonna evaluate my property. That'd be like me going down to their place and putting in a damn hog farm. And, how would they like that? And that's gonna evaluate theirs. Another thing, on these batteries, they're talking about their recyclable. And the battery cost coming down. I don't know nothing coming down nowadays. But, I know that the batteries that they use in a lot of these electric cars, they are non-recyclable, and they're kind of having a problem figuring out what to do with them. And the cost of them is astronomical. There was an article in one of the newspapers not long ago. A guy owned a Tesla electric car. Batteries went bad in them. He junked the car because he said it's going to cost more to put batteries in the car than what the car was worth. Where batteries coming down none. Also on these panels, where are they made? Made in USA?
Some instances they are, yes.
Well, I know, what is it, LG within the making? LG has dissolved their business as far as making solar panels. I haven't seen any of them made in the USA. Fuel prices. She's talking about fuel prices, compared to solar. If our president would do the right darn thing, our fuel price would be back down where they were before we went in office. But I'm just not, and there's something else. I don't know if y'all have kept up with it or not, but Nottoway has got the same kind of project being proposed. And they first had a ban on solar. And they got this proposal, so they kind of brought it back to life. And it's been a lot of interest in that over there. And they have backed up on it. They were headed dead forward with it. All of a sudden, they didn't put the brakes on it. I don't know if any of y'all have read or keep up with the Courier Record paper, but this right here was written by a lawyer that has warned the Nottaway. If y'all hadn't read it, and I'll leave this copy for everybody to pass it around if they'd like. It's a lot of information right here, and this guy's got the facts to back him up. He's not talking just about Nottaway County. He is explaining to Nottaway County the facts that have happened in numerous other counties that took on solar and what it has done to those counties. And I really, really think, y'all might ought to read this. It's a lot of valuable information, and I contacted this lawyer, and he gave me permission to repost it in Amelia Monitor if I wanted to. And I wanted to bring it to y'all. It's his thing is don't be blinded by proposed mega solar farm projects. He's got a lot of, not only that, if y'all wanted to, you could take his information and call these other counties. See what they have to say about it. And I think that would be a very valuable source of information. But I'm not prepared to sit back and roll over and let my land be evaluated over something like this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? We had a lot of people speaking last time, kind of quiet tonight. I think we've had good information came out of North Carolina and from the solar company. So I was hoping they would arouse a few questions or else answer some of the questions you might have had. Go ahead.
My name's Allison. I live in Jetersville, behind the landfill. I was curious, looking at your map, when you talk about the entrance there on Buckskin Creek, like, I don't know who could maybe answer, where are things going to be coming in and out? Did I miss that? Was it answered? Because I know Old Courthouse Road, I know Buckskin Creek Road, and then Perkinson Road. So I'm just kind of trying to picture the traffic of all the array coming in or the timber going out.
They'd have to speak to that. I forgot where they said the entrance.
Yeah,
I know where the entrance is on the map, but.
the main entrance would be on Buckskin Creek Road. We probably would have at least one other entrance, but deliveries would be coming from 360. I forget there's one other road and then.
It's either gonna be, so you're gonna bring like tractor trailers down Buckskin Creek?
Yes.
Does everybody know Buckskin Creek? I mean, I just don't picture that being like, I don't know. I think of things from the beginning to the end. And to speak to the end, I mean, it's pretty convenient that all of this will be right next to a landfill that might want to be closing down, the townspeople might want to decommission. I just think there's a lot of things to look at and to question. And to speak to being a good neighbor, you'd have to be here to be a good neighbor. So like, I just feel, I don't feel this, I'm pro solar, I'm pro personal property freedoms, I'm pro food freedoms, I'm pro health freedoms. But there does come a time where we have to think of others because we are a community. And so the decisions that are made affect others. So I just, I have solar panels on my own roof, so I think they should be on every chicken house, every schoolhouse, every local government building, anywhere there's like a high energy need or a big roof. Like, you should harvest rainwater. There's a lot of things we can be doing to be more green and more energy efficient. I just don't know that this fits that bill. And I don't think it's necessarily a good deal for any of the neighbors. I know what it's like to live next to the landfill. I had Dominion come through and put their lines on our property. And somebody else can have it, I'm done. So that's just how I feel.
Thank you, Alice. Anyone else like to speak?
Hello, Martin Conkle, 16211 Church Street. I've heard this conversation go off the rails so many times over the past few months. Oil, national, Biden, whatever, it's gone kind of crazy. This is Amelia County. Let's focus on Amelia County. And I think one of the aspects that I said at the beginning is this could be a good opportunity if it was done correctly. When these guys first came in the county, I don't think they did it correctly. And to their credit, one over here has talked to me twice, one-on-one, two conversations. I'm a nobody. He didn't have to do that. He reached out to me. They've made some big changes. They've made this very much out of sight, out of mind, reduced the footage. I've seen, you can go around this state and you don't have to go forward to see how these solar projects are done incorrectly, how they are done wrong. Go up here to Genito, you can see how it's done wrong. Give credit where credit is due. These guys are doing it right as best they can. Some people just don't want it. They're going to find any reason to hate it, to not want it. I get that, especially if maybe it's somewhere close to your lane. These guys have really put an effort. They've come in, changed some things up. I'm just giving credit where credit is due. The second thing is on the county level, business sense. We are over budget this year by a few $1 million. What's the proposal? Tap into our savings account. How many years can we keep tapping our savings accounts? We're also looking at the fact that even though we have diminishing enrollment in our schools, the schools still need more money. We don't have a tax problem in this county. You can raise the tax 1 cent, you get $120,000 out of the citizens. How much do our taxes need to be raised for us to start funding our county? We don't have a tax problem in this county. We have an investment problem in this county. These people have stepped up and tried to invest in the county. This is kind of what we need. If we're going to maintain our conservative nature, our low tax rates, we need good investment in our county. And I think that's part of the conversation that many people, we talk about Biden, Ukraine, diesel fuel, whatever. This is kind of conversation, honest conversation we really need to have in this county to think about. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak?
I would like to speak.
Go ahead, state your name and address.
All right. My name is Elizabeth Bradshaw Paget, and I'm one of the granddaughters of Rosa Jackson Corder. My address is 124 Leeds, Williamsburg, Virginia, and I own 155 acres of land in Amelia County. I inherited 63 acres from my mother, and I bought 91 acres from a family member in order to keep the property in the Corder family. The property has been in the Jackson Corder family for over 100 years, and our family grows pine trees. I'm here tonight to speak against the solar farm, and these are my reasons. Number one, the animals in the area will lose their habitat. Number two, the solar energy is very expensive and difficult to store. When clearing the land, the topsoil will be removed. Topsoil is high in organic matter and nutrients and needed to grow crops. The roads in the area of the planned site are narrow, and it will be difficult for large equipment to use the road in normal traffic. And finally, I attended the planning board, the one you had before, virtually, and heard all the comments from the citizens. Also, I listened to the board's discussion and vote, and the board voted unanimously to deny the solar farm structure. So I'm hoping that you will do that again. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir?
Justin Wade, I live on 6101 Buckskin Creek Road. I'm also speaking for my mother, Susan Wade, which is part of the project on 1912 Poorhouse Road. And we're in favor of it. I'm a part of the Corder family. She's a part of the Corder family. We've all of the same land is intertwined in there. We're in favor of the project. As a landowner, we should be able to benefit from our land. That should be everybody in the county. They should be able to benefit from their land if they want to. And the other talking point is solar has been in talk with us. They've changed it for the community. They've changed it for the county. They're pulling back away from all the houses and stuff. And I also like the fact that when it's done, the land will be returned and it'll still be in my name. It'll still be rural. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak? It's dark back in our, so you have to stand up. Anyone else like to speak?
Right in this room. Good evening. My name is Skylar Zunk. I grew up and live in Moseley, Virginia, not too far from here. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Land and Liberty Coalition, which is a project of a nonprofit in Richmond called Conservatives for Clean Energy. My interest first got piqued with energy, not to take the conversation outside of Amelia County, but during my service in the Trump administration for 2 years, getting to see a bunch of energy policy, energy generation take place all across the country. And if we could drill for oil in Amelia County, I'd be the first in line to support it. But Conservatives for Clean Energy, we support an all of the above approach to energy. That means investing in all different sorts of energy generation that's going to help rural Virginia create electricity, sell that electricity to the grid, and bring more income to rural areas. We support smart, conservative, and responsible energy projects as they pertain to rural Virginia. We support solar projects that are going to help communities, going to help local businesses, and of course, as you guys can appreciate, help landowners. Our coalition exists to get these voices in the room together. We spend a lot of time with planning commissions and boards of supervisors. We talk to businesses who stand to benefit from the increased traffic and business that solar developments can bring. We talk to neighbors who, believe it or not, sometimes like solar projects because they're a very stable, quiet, non-polluting, good neighbor. And talk to landowners and business leaders who see this as a phenomenal income source for rural Virginia. As you can imagine, as a conservative organization, we talk a lot about property rights. Scott talked about that as well, how it's a unique American right and privilege that we have to use our property how we see fit. And we believe landowners are well within their rights to bring these projects to you all, to propose these for you all to consider. Of course, you got to be mindful of the neighbors. And from what I've read about this project and I've seen at your meeting this past year, the project shrunk in order to address some of those concerns of neighbors and reshaping it to make sure that their needs and considerations are heard as well. We also talk about the economic development proposition these projects can bring to rural Virginia. You guys talked about who's actually going to be working on these projects, who's going to get these jobs. That story is not great at the moment, but it's getting better. I'm not sure if you've heard of the SHINE program based out of Southside Virginia Community College in Blackstone, where they're training young people to be they're certified and able to install these panels. It's a career for these folks. They can move from project to project, not dissimilar to a construction job. These projects bring millions of dollars in tax revenues to the county over the lifespan of their projects, millions more than they would had they remained in timberland or in some cases farmland. That's money that you guys can, or the board can budget for our schools, first responders, et cetera. And there's also a new organization that just launched a couple months ago called the Southside Virginia Business Alliance to get these businesses, these contractors, these graders, these installers, hotel owners who want to see this increased business together in a room so they can talk to developers and immediately have 10 different companies that they can work from to bid on contracts to get local businesses benefiting from this local investment. Really happy to be here this evening. I think this project, in its current form, is going to be good for the county. I would love to chat with you all more as you can continue to develop clean energy projects in rural Virginia. I think this is an awesome win for the county if you guys are able to do it in the right way. So thank you for your attention this evening.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak? Like I said, we got a big agenda tonight. We got 4 other projects after this. Come on in. State your name and address.
I'm Maria Lynn. My husband Randy Lynn is back there. We've lived in Amelia for 1 year. We have lived in Mechanicsville and in Midlothian for the last 30 years. We decided we're getting close to retirement, about 10 years. We wanted to move out here. We're 4.5 acres off of West Creek Road, 5440 West Creek Road, which is right there on wetlands next to the property there. This was our last house. This was our retirement home. We want to have bees there. We raise bees. Removing the land and the foliage there in that area will affect those bees. I'm not against economic development. I'm not against solar. But I do, timberland is behind our property there. And those trees have been cut down in the last year for every day for a year. We've heard those all first, in and out. It's right there at Happy Hollow Road. We're on the road, West Creek Road there. We just hear that noise every day. And I cannot imagine now the deforestation that's going to have to happen. We have one row of trees back to our property between there and the property we're talking about. That's not going to block our view. It will decrease our property value. And in this real estate climate, we paid more for the house than we normally would have paid. And I just ask that you not approve this.
Thank you, ma'am.
I just have a question for the, you guys. Is there any,
Still state your name and address.
sorry, Corey Busick, 18781 Courthouse Road. My question is about the expansion. Is there any possibility or potential of expansion of this project beyond what is proposed here at any point during the planning or construction or even down the road?
We don't plan to expand this project. This would be the extent of our project. I can't speak if, somebody else applied for a different project. But this, we couldn't get a permit for this land and then build on other land. So this is the extent that we're talking about, and we're not planning to expand.
But if you were to get the permission granted to do this and then go to the surrounding, landowners of that property, theoretically, is it possible for, maybe this is a.
They'd have to come back to us. They'd have to come back to the planning commission.
To be able to.
You'd have a public hearing and board of supervisors have to okay it one way or the other.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Now, the public hearing for this is just for this project locked into this number of acres. These landowners, any other thing comes up, it has to come back before the county. The citizens.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am. State your name, though. We need to state your name.
Stanley, I live on Dennisville Road, right near West Creek. Fortunately for me, Mr. Whitaker pulled his land, so I won't be looking at it. However, I wonder, is there a possibility that the folks that are going to see this solar, can you shrink the property down to give them more of a buffer? If it were to get approved, can you use less land to help these other, I wouldn't want it, and I stated that the last time. I want to look at it, I want to hear it, I want to see it. And these other homeowners are now in the same boat. Is there a way to reduce the amount of product? Is my question.
Yeah, I think we've done exactly that. We've removed some parcels from it. I think we're at least 1,000 feet from any house. And to clarify in the West Creek, that yellow shape is a 1/4 mile away from West Creek. Maybe a little bit less than a 1/4 mile away, but you have a thin row of trees and then you have a pretty big swamp. And what we're showing is the other side of that swamp. So it's at least, 1,500 feet. But this would not be visible, from any house. It's very, very fun back there.
How about the lady that spoke? That said it supposedly was just a row of trees behind her. Of course, you'd have to really see where she lived and things like that to see.
If it's 50, I believe I know that part of West Creek. I think there is timbering that has been happening, which is not related to us.
Oh.
I believe that's the trees on the east side of the swamp. If you look at the 320 acres, that's entirely on the west side of the swamp. That's why that would be over 1,500 feet from West Creek Road.
So it could be two different parcels of land, one being cleared now as compared to y'all's tract. The one being cleared, is that part of y'all's tract?
It's on that parcel, but that timbering is not related to us.
Oh.
That's a part of that parcel that is much closer to West Creek Road than we would ever be.
Okay. Did that answer your question, ma'am? Okay. Anyone else like to speak? Anyone else like to speak? State name and address, please.
My name is Robert Porter Bradshaw. I'm from Farmville, Virginia, 228 Lakeside Drive. Spoke before. Holly sent me this nice letter. I appreciate it. But y'all, can I ask y'all a question?
You can ask anything, sir. Now, whether we can answer it, I don't know.
Y'all know the two major advantages for this project to go forward as it pertains to the residents and the landowners and the community of Amelia County. In y'all state, the two major advantages that this project will bring to this area.
I don't think it's our responsibility. That's the board supervisor's responsibility. Well, our responsibility is to view the project, see if it goes into the code that Amelia has established, and come up with a suggestion to the board of supervisors. The board of supervisors have the final say as to pros and the cons, but it's not our responsibility as the planning commission. You need to ask the board of supervisors that question.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't mean to shut you down, but that's just our responsibility.
I prepared a 5-minute speech, but my wife suggested this idea, and I think this is real good. I think we heard some of it, but it just didn't get real clear to me.
Well, I mean, that,
It should be advantages to this, and it should be disadvantages to it.
all right, I mean, that's kind of what the board supervisors need, and that's what we hope to pull out from the discussion. Y'all's pros, those cons, and all this information goes to them after we make our suggestion, and they will have another public hearing after this one. And then they can decide whether to do something that night, or they can table it for a couple months to make that. But that is their responsibility, not our responsibility. But I appreciate the question. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
I made that suggestion. Can I say something?
Yes, yes, ma'am, but you still have to state your name and address.
It's Melody Bradshaw, 228 Lakeside Drive, Farmville, Virginia. This gentleman that spoke said that the restoring the soil to agricultural use for this was not insurmountable. And that was just kind of, it went on. All right, so who's going to surmount it and who's going to pay for it? And obviously, to restore it means that it needs to be restored. And he also said, the other part of my question is, he also said that it is harmful to peanut crops. What other crops have been tested? It seems like the whole presentation to me presented solar farms is very idealistic. And things that were not like the property owners, the house values. There's not many studies on that. Okay, so it just pretty much irritated me because I feel like, and then I felt like he said, I know how y'all think. Well, I got pretty presumptuous, I think, how we here in Amelia County, Prince Edward County, wherever you're from, think. I just feel like that to say that this problem is not insurmountable, tell me who is going to fix it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Would you like to respond?
Yes, please.
So a few points, I guess. With regard to restoring the property to agricultural use, if it was in agricultural use prior, there's a process that you go through. You have to deal with the soil pH. You have to properly use various additives to get the soil back to being, useful for agricultural purposes. But in this case, most of the land is being used currently for forestry. Probably wouldn't require much, if any, work to get it back to being useful for that purpose. There's not a lot of changes that are going to take place to the soil. And in fact, in many cases, the soil actually, it's soil that's not, overly maintained for agricultural purposes in the first place. Then a lot of times the ground cover treatment that's used for the project area actually would benefit the soil over time. So that's kind of what I was referring to there. As far as who would pay for it, obviously it would be the landowner or whoever it was that was going to put that land back into agricultural production at the end of the process. Whatever that landowner wants to do with the property, it would be obviously their job to do whatever they can do with it. They may have an agreement with the solar developer that the solar developer would do that at the end of the process, but that would usually be a transaction between those two parties. So there's nothing particularly unusual about that. With regard to the types of crops, I spoke at length with Cooperative Extension at NC State, which NC State's kind of the Virginia Tech down our neck of the woods. Talked with crop specialists across the board. No one really was able to identify anything that they felt was a problem. And again, the one issue that did come up was zinc from the galvanized steel. It really didn't have anything to do with the solar itself. It had to do with the wrapping system and the materials that are used to hold it. And so the way that the crop scientists addressed it was that they didn't have a lot of research. They weren't sure if that zinc impact would mean that if you tried to plant peanuts in that area that you'd have patches where peanuts wouldn't grow, basically where the posts were, or if it would be a more pervasive thing. But again, they felt that there was probably a way to treat that soil after the fact so that you could restore it eventually to agricultural production if you wanted to. There's a cost to do that. And so that is kind of the process that would be, have to be evaluated by the landowner at the end of that process, depending on what direction they want to go. Did I miss any other specific questions you have? I'm happy to answer anything you have.
I had a couple more, but not.
Oh, and you did mention the property value thing. I will say that, again, she's absolutely right. I did say there aren't a lot of studies on this because, quite frankly, there just aren't a lot of studies on this yet. What I've seen is what we call matched pair studies, where they look at a piece of property that doesn't have solar near it, and they look at a similar piece of property that's valued similarly next to a project, next to an area that does have solar next to it. They saw very little difference in value in those particular cases, particularly for agricultural land bordering solar. They actually very small incremental increase in value in this one study that was done. In a second study, or in that same study, for a residential property, depending on the proximity of the home to the farmland or to the solar project, there was a very small decrease in that value. But it's one study. And I will tell you that as a guy that works for a university, one study is usually not what you want to base your decision making. There's just not a lot of information because this is a relatively new technology. We do see a lot of solar projects going in, but we haven't had enough time with enough houses being sold next to these properties to really have a sense that we can get a big enough sample size to answer that question definitively. So I would say it's as I alluded to earlier, it's kind of a common sense thing. If it's the house is right up against it, there's probably an impact. The house is further away and the project is screened in some way, probably not much of an impact based on the limited data that we have.
Goes back to if you can get free electricity, plug it in and how close you are.
There's a lot of different factors you can bring in.
Yeah. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Stand up. State your name again.
Right, y'all. Still same person. 58 Lakeside Drive, Fargo, Virginia. These gentlemen said that they would not, that they would be here for the long term, that others come in and build and sell. Are they under legal obligation to stick around and not do that, or we just going to go by their word?
That would be into final say that the board of supervisors will lock up. Holly may have an answer to that one, but that would be one of the requirements that if they okayed the project, they could put that in there.
That they couldn't sell it. They had to stay here for the 20 or 30 years and maintain it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, very good. One gentleman came up and spoke and said that he had seen other projects or checked into them that hadn't been done right, but that this was going to be done right. How do we know that's true?
I guess you look at other projects that they have done, ma'am, but that's all I know. I think a lot of them, the ones in my area one of the first ones that went in, and I think we didn't have quite as much teeth into the projects. And that may be part of it. I have one on each side of me and one just across the river from me. So, I mean, I've got them all around, but it's a different company, it's a totally different company.
Things that are in the processing, the recycling places, it seems like they haven't perfected this thing yet. And it may be advisable to the county to wait till it's a little bit more perfected before it takes up so much of our property.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other people like to speak before I shut her down? Anyone else like to speak for or against? One, twice. I close the public hearing on that project. Thank you for your participation. Please be quiet because we still have a lot more business to do, but you're welcome to leave if you'd like. Does anybody on the planning commission have any questions for the officials?
I have a question about the lead guys. You're going to do a bond for the Inverters, right?
Oh,
What?
I think that's outlined in our. That's all,
That's,
that's all part of the decommissioning plan.
that's the one that's 16 million.
It's right in there, it's spelled out. Yes, sir.
All right, and one thing that bothers me is in your proposal, I don't think a good job there. But in your proposal, you're including like 1.5% cost of living every year increase. It looks like 3%.
I believe the word is also has us recalculate.
Yeah, we're still
Right.
if you can take your conversation outside, that would be great.
I actually think this is a really important point for everyone to understand on the committee is that there is inflationary concerns that we're all experiencing right now. And I think that that true up mechanism that you have built in here that we would have to abide by is just really important, right? Because we may be off. Numbers that were estimated may be too conservative, right? So then that could swing in our favor, but then inflation may come up and there may be a bunch of projects that are decommissioned and then another study, a third party is commissioned to do the study and it gets trued up. And so like, there has to be a mechanism in here where we take what we're doing and then we readjust the trajectory of how this gets decommissioned in 35 years. I mean, I think a lot of things that we're talking about happen 35 years from now, like that's,
Right.
my math's terrible, 1985, right? Like, myself.
I mean, and I understand because inflation's probably gone up like 20% in the last 3 months.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand that.
And so like, it's something that you guys should kind of just internalize, right? Because we probably don't have that number correct, right? But we need to have the mechanism to true it up. And you guys need to have comfort that that can be possible so that you are protected.
Okay, and that's my concern is what happens at the end. Is it, I did a lot of internet research on it. And that seems to be a thing is that the value really isn't there to do it for the recycling in most cases, but it's all brand new stuff, so nobody really knows. And especially nobody knows what it's going to be 30 years from now.
Yeah.
And so I just want to make sure the mechanism is there, so it's taken care of at the end. Because, the county is not going to suck up a $16 million bill. I mean, and it needs to just be addressed periodically, like I said, every 5 years, because things change, numbers change, inflation changes, things like that. So as long as it's going to be decent enough to cover it, and you're going to take into account increases every 5 years, and I think not a bad, but you will take that amount of bond out at the very beginning, right?
I think that would push that at year 5.
I believe the limit says year 5.
Okay, so your first 5 years, that thing had like $6.6 million in decommissioned in the first 5 years. You would push the box for that first, right?
Well, I
I
think
believe
that
it was calculated on the 5th year estimate and
Okay.
the decommission.
Well, this is the value of the decommissioning cost would be after 5 years because resale, and it was a good document, I read all of it. because of the resale of the equipment being so new at a higher value. And so that's why they figured it'd be $6.6 million to decommission it in 5 years. So you're gonna take a bond out for that between now and 5 years, right?
I think we would propose not to, and I'll tell you the reason why. It's because we've just taken all this equipment and we've paid for it up front, and we basically have now 25 years to recoup that investment. And we have a long-term power sales contract with Dominion or someone else that obligates us to sell them power for the next 18 to 20 years. And all of that investment has just been made at year zero. And so however many millions, like 20, 30, and so all that money has been put in. It's kind of basically like, okay, that's our skin in the game. It's all right there. If we walk away in the first 5 years, like, that's a huge problem because we've got a bank that has that, and the bank has lent us money. If there's some catastrophic event, we carry insurance to completely rebuild it.
And that's my point exactly. If something happens, you walk away from it within 5 years, there is no bond. You're already broke because you already put your money up front. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, but we wouldn't, what's the, the situation that you're describing is that the project doesn't work, right? Because we have no fuel cost.
Okay.
Right? And we fixed all of our other costs. So let's say the project doesn't work. So that would be an insurance claim. The project would be recommissioned and rebuilt.
Suppose so.
What happens if you took your car, in a different analogy, what happens if you brought a brand new car, you put your insurance on it, you pull out of the parking lot and the car got totaled? Would you just walk away from it?
Insurance company's gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
But what you're suggesting is I'm gonna buy a car, finance it for 35 years, but the first 5 years, I'm not gonna insure it.
No, but you're gonna carry insurance. No, but you're gonna carry insurance.
Okay, that's kind of what I'm asking you about this.
So
about the first 5 years.
So we'll carry insurance on our project.
So if y'all, if it's not destroyed, if something happens, you y'all say, we're out of the solar business. And that's my concern. Something happens to your company. Things happen all the time. In companies. Something happens to your company, you say, all right, we're done, we're gonna walk away from it, we're finished. And it's 4.5 years. Who's gonna clean it up? Or who's gonna buy it? People aren't standing in line to buy these things. That's when you're talking about spending.
I would disagree with you on that point.
So the mortgage is renegotiated. In the first 10 years, it would be worth way more than what it costs them to book it. So it could easily be resold.
Look.
I mean, they want to build these projects everywhere. So they're having,
and I understand.
I think that they're having fights like this now. So it's already there. You can imagine how many people are going to buy it when it's already there, it already exists. So
I don't want to buy it.
So the county, that was part of our renegotiation. That it allows more upfront money.
Well, and that's my concern about the bond, is it for the first 5 years, and because, I mean, I don't want the county to get stuck with it. I'm looking out for the protection of the county, of the taxpayers.
Could we respond this way? Is that,
Okay.
understand your concern? There's a gap here. What I would propose is that we have further discussions between now and, the next step in this process. There's a whole different variation of ways that we can approach this. One way is just we figure out how to make you guys comfortable. Another way is to figure out how to have some graduated increase of a bond up to that year 5 amount. Right? There's a whole bunch of different ways that we can kind of bridge this gap to figure out how to, get to the place where you think there's appropriate skin in the game. We can demonstrate that to you, and you also feel like you're not being left.
And that's probably the biggest flaw I see in your plan, is that first 5 year period.
Yeah.
So the default is that we will have to put that bond up in year 0. And what we've proposed to the board of supervisors is that we won't have to do that until year 5. And part of that proposal is that we'll pay more money in addition to property taxes. And then the point I made was I would rather pay the county than tie up the money in some bond
for equipment that's under warranty for 25 years. The board does not have to approve that. That's something we have proposed to them. They can decide, no, you need it from year zero. And then I think that would change what we can offer in the siding agreement. But that is something we've proposed to them. I think what we're looking for tonight is a recommendation from you guys so that we can, bring that proposal to the board, but that would have to be approved by them. The default is that without them approving that, we are putting up the bond in year zero.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's up to them. We don't approve or disapprove anything. We make recommendations.
Well, when you talk about 30 years, and you talk about the value of the, recyclable, and there are new technologies out there on the horizon that can develop rapidly, such as hydrogen fuel cell and the new type of nuclear that's much cooler and doesn't have the environmental hazards. For instance, that would make a tremendous impact, could make a tremendous impact. And so there's certainly some risk when, 30 years things seem to move more rapidly as we go along rather than less. And so I think that's important consideration. The one question that I have is on the pollinators. It's a good idea, but can't you proffer so many acres or plots of pollinators will be planted in the project instead of just, pollinators?
Is the question, can we give a specific pollinator like species that we're going to plant?
No.
No, he was just saying, instead of how many, are you gonna do it over 600 acres? You're gonna do it over 2 acres? You're gonna do it over half acre? It'll depend partly on the type of ground and how your setup is set up.
Yeah, we've got 8 projects that we're building in Michigan, for example, and on all those, the interior ground cover is slightly different than the exterior ground cover. The pollinator species mix is on the whole exterior of the project. So that's basically along the fence line, because that's kind of where the bees are coming in. There's other instances where we would spread that mix through the whole thing, but there is kind of a science to looking at the soil and looking at the soil conditions and what's best suited for that ground cover mixture.
And actually,
wheat, for example, clover is a very common thing that we see that seed mixture.
But it'd be helpful if you had some kind of estimate or something, rather than, because some, there are some pollinators along the highways, but they're very, very small. And so something as regards to the size would be useful.
You want to speak? No. Okay. Any more questions? We've heard a lot of information this evening. What's your pleasure? You want to table it? Think about it? We had a lot to digest. We wouldn't have to have a public hearing next time, but we could just discuss it, be open forum, but we'd be the only ones discussion. Or do you want to make a recommendation to the board of supervisors and let them go from there?
For those of you that's been on the planning commission, Juan's the only one that's been on there longer than I have. And y'all know I'm fairly opinionated in most cases. And so these guys, I understand we got to move toward the future at some point in our life, and these guys put together a great document, very informative.
They answered a lot of questions from last time.
A lot of questions covered a lot of bases, and still had a couple of issues, but very, very good document, very informative. The thing that gets me is that, and I understand if we need industry and we need things to move forward. At the same time, I grew up here, and to me, putting in a 700-acre solar farm is no different than building a 700-acre warehouse. And to me, it takes away, and I drive through the country, I like green pastures with cattle grazing in it, or horses, and I like to see the trees, and it's just not something that appeals to me. I mean, and I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just on the fence. I've never had this type of decision, I don't think, since I've been here, because I really am literally on the fence, whether to agree with it or disagree with it.
Well, I see your point of view too, but I mean, as a farmer, but you know, if land comes up available close to me, I've got a choice of either buying it or losing it. But if I buy it, I'm gonna pay it for the person that's gonna put that $100,000 or $300,000 home in there.
Right.
And they could care less what I had to pay for it. But no way in the world can I afford growing corn on milk to afford to buy the land. But if you don't buy it, you can't sustain in agriculture. And we can see that in a lot of the other lands that, you know, nice farms that right now sitting in houses. And that's a concern of mine too. I mean, I don't think it's a solar farm. I think it's solar power, but it's not a farm because, I mean, they don't go down, like Jay Bryle said last time, they don't go down to the country store and buy a bag of feed, something, puts a little cash into, into the county. But like you say, I mean, I've got them all around me. But to me, I'd rather have a solar farm than a house because I don't have that much traffic. Because if I want to spread manure and spread it in that solar farm, it's not going to raise cane if I spill it on the road. But, I had a housing development up the road. It's a little different story, and that's a thing. But I mean, we got to be concerned too about the citizens. And I know those that move here from Chesterfield. I mean, it's like night and day. I mean, I have a grandson up in Sterling. He comes down here. Well, up there, our houses are about as tight as we're sitting here. You come down here, he's got two totally different worlds. But it's a big project. You start about 600 acres, boy, that's a lot of land. I mean, I could grow a lot of corn on that, but take that timber off and get it to corn ground costs a lot of money. I mean, even if you do bulldozer it, you're not gonna get much out of it for the first few years. I mean, you've taken a lot off. I mean, it's a big concern. I don't mind if they're off the road, you don't see them. But I mean, I go to Buckingham sometimes on 60 and it's one right there. I mean, 50 feet off the road, no fence around it.
Right in your face.
So, I mean, that's a little different, but, as a lady spoke last time, somebody clear cut the timber and she was raising holy cane because it was ugly now. Well, that timber was his crop, just like a corn crop. And, it's reseeded. It's take 30, 35 years before you get your money back out of it. But I can see where a forester, it's a whole lot more profitable to put solar panels there and is try to grow loblolly pine right now. But I mean, but I'm saying, I'd be more willing to go and crop a forested land than row crop land that's already fertilized and all. I mean, that was my big concern last time. And being that close to the highway with, buffers that's the one over on Gentle Road. I mean, the one behind me on the brother's land, trees come back out, you won't see it at all. You can see a little bit in there now, that's off the road. But the other one, you've got 15 years, you're gonna be looking at panels before the trees get up. If rats don't eat the trees off.
I'd like to say some,
Go ahead.
this packet here, you got a list of a lot of people that live through there. A lot of people from the last meeting called me again this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want it, period. Some don't want it because they're just stuck in their way. I do believe these people have, I know they went back and talked to a lot of the adjacent landowners. And, they faced a lot of opposition and they jumped over through a lot of hoops to try to make it the best they can. We sat here tonight and heard a little 20-minute crash course on solar panels. And these people right here, they even said that basically that it's a very valuable spot of where they want to do this. You don't have these spots located everywhere and anywhere. The spot's not going nowhere. I personally don't really want solar farms, but I am glad to see people like Justin Wade prosper from it in the Scots too. But then on the other hand, these adjacent landowners right here, they're not the only people that are benefiting from it are the landowners. And I personally think that they're underbidding themselves. 21,000 homes, we've all got a light bill. We know what that light bill is. County's not getting nothing. And we had a 20-minute crash course tonight. I think we should just hold off on this. And I don't know how to word this, but I think that the Board of Supervisors needs to come up with a plan of like, if you want to bring an acre, it's going to cost you this much of proffers to the county and possibly to the landowner.
Special exception permits don't carry proffers, just rezonings.
Okay, well, that shoots that in the foot. But I just think that the county is losing out on this right here. I don't think we know nowhere near what, I think we should talk to other counties about what they've done and what they should have done. It's not but so many spots in Amelia that you can put these things. And we've already done this once or twice, and I don't really feel very proud of what I have been a part of on that. And I don't want to mess up again. So, I'm gonna make a motion that we deny it and like to get some further information on, the pros and cons of solar farming and how the county or people could benefit from this rather than just a 20-minute thing. And I'm basing that off of these people right here in the blue. It goes back to what they said about, love thy neighbor. And I'm going to kind of add on to love thy neighbor as you would love yourself. I wouldn't want panels right next to me. It's not far from where I am, but I'm not totally against it. But at this point in my life and at this point tonight, I'm not for it.
And you put that in the form of a motion?
I'm gonna put that in the form of a motion.
To deny it altogether?
To deny it altogether.
You've heard the motion. Is our second? It's not, it dies.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Do we know an estimate of how much tax revenue, once completed, is expected to bring in?
I can't answer that. I did ask.
Here, we don't know.
I did ask Holly how they were,
That's right.
how it would,
We don't know.
the taxes it's paying now as compared to what the taxes would be then. And she said that, Ms. Wash had run numbers. It's 2 or 3 ways to do it. And whichever way it was, we were going to come out on the better end.
I think that's.
And I'd have to let you explain it to her. Yes, sir. You can maybe answer that.
Point here that Sam can elaborate on with our siting agreement that might have been kind of missed on the commission. Yeah, so we're proposing a siting agreement, which is kind of like a proffer, but it's specific to solar projects. And the taxes on the solar project would probably be around 200,000 in the first year and go up each year. And then when you combine that with the siting agreement, over the life of the project, it would be about 10 million in revenue to the county. And what we've proposed to the board is that some of that would be front loaded so that in the first 2 years, it would be about 1 million of that amount in the first in construction and the first year of operation. But over the life, around 10 million.
So it'd be about 300,000 a year. 10 million over 30 years.
The thing that bothers me about it, I guess, more than anything else, is, and they tried to educate us some tonight, and I appreciate that. But There's nobody sitting on this commission disqualified to make the decision whether it's good or bad.
So this
That's the problem.
this is what's happened in all the localities. It's kind of been, you know, the regulations, the zoning and so forth has been done on the fly as it's going along. And there are some localities that have passed local ordinances. But I just read an article that now there is a bill that's passed the Virginia legislature, both houses, that actually I don't remember all the details enough to quote it, but it comes under, if there's 50 acres of forest land and 10 acres of agricultural land or 10 acres of agricultural land involved, then there has to be further information. I think that there's a body that would consider that, and so there would be information more disseminated. But also part of this, and this is of course what the solar companies don't like, I'm sure they must know about it, is it requires mitigation. And mitigation can be, you know, planting trees somewhere else or whatever offsite for what they do. So in other words, Virginia has been wide open. That's the reason we've had so many companies running around trying to establish solar. And let me say that this one sounds like it's well above average compared to some of them, like some of them that are just trying to get it up and then sell it off to somebody else. But this law, and at the point this article was written, and why was it had not been signed by the governor yet. So I don't want to say it might have been signed at this point. I don't know, but it has been passed by both houses, and it will not go into effect. Will not affect any projects that are already at a certain stage, but it will go fully into effect in 2024. And without reading the whole article to you, you all have heard about this in Virginia legislature, I'm absolutely sure. In your position, if you didn't, well, then you ought to be fired.
And to answer your question, this project is past the maturity point that's referenced in that bill.
Right, it would be.
What that bill tried to establish was to say, hey, this is a concern at the state level. We're going to give a long runway for, you know, folks developing these projects to adapt to it. And we're kind of past that stage of the runway. And likewise here, we can hear your all's concerns of that there was a lot of information presented tonight. We'll need to digest it. I think we also have tried to make a concerted effort to look at your ordinance, understand the rules of the playing field, abide by that ordinance, and ensure that we're kind of staying in bounds of what you guys are asking to do with these types of projects. And also to take all the information that we're receiving from neighbors and from the community and to adapt the project to kind of pull it back in and to create vegetative barriers around a piece of property that will be logged. right? That will be clear cut, because that's what it's intended to be. And so that's where the future of this land is to be clear cut and harvested, right? And so, you know, what we're trying to do is once that occurs, is to put a solar project there and then it has the appropriate buffers there, staying within the boundaries of the ordinance that we have created.
All right. There's a motion on the floor. Can I get a second and not a die? And then we'll discuss and we can come back with another denial after discussion. But there's our second, or you want to let it die, discuss some more? Come with another motion. Can I get a second? All right, the motion is dead. We'll discuss some more, come up with another motion.
Based on a lack of expertise, and I understand where Rich is coming from, and I almost seconded it. But the thing is that if somebody, we're not versed in this type of stuff. If there was any way we could get somebody to look at this plan, a third party, somebody unaffected, and take a look at it and say, yeah, I think that's a good plan. I think it's going to be good for the county. I support it 100%. But I just don't have the background knowledge to be able to make that decision. And that just really makes me feel uncomfortable about it. If it was a subdivision, zone and something like that, yeah, I've got the background knowledge for that, not this. And so what do you think are our chances of tabling it for 30 days, having somebody review this and give us their opinion, like a third party assessment of it?
Couple questions. So who would be the one to choose who reviews it? I feel like this could be one of those things where every person you go to is gonna have a different opinion of.
I'd say
This is good. No, this is not.
I'd say you'd have to go to Board of Supervisors.
Yeah,
They'd have to be locked in as to.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to get some names and then they could pick on some other counties that might have had the same outside sources.
would foot the bill for that.
Well, it would allow people individually to do further research. So I will go ahead and make a motion to defer it for 30 days. And partly the reason is because we have a big agenda tonight, and this is going to require a lot of thought and discussion that I'd rather not do under cramped time frame. So that's the motion I'd like to make.
All right, you heard the second motion.
I'll second it.
All right, the motion is second. Any more discussion now?
I think it's two people that you need to check with. It's two people you need to satisfy. Parsons and Josh Tanner. Okay? They are lock, stock, and barrel invested in where they are at. One of them was here tonight. You need to satisfy, not to talk, but you need to satisfy. I don't think you're far off, but you need to satisfy them, and I think like you probably come on board.
And I will commend you for, last time when we were here, our biggest issues were the amount of farmland that was being taken up and how close you were to the neighbors, right? Because if I own land, I would be upset if somebody came and told me I couldn't do what I wanted to with it when I'm trying to protect my neighbors, because I genuinely care about my neighbors. I applaud y'all for doing a good job with that. Y'all went in, you made the adjustments. My only comment is, I think we need as a board to look at what our duty is here. If our duty is, does this meet the requirements for the zoning and everything else? If it does, then they have made good adjustments. If it does, then it needs to go forward, and then it goes to the supervisors. And I think that's the point where they make, does this meet the needs of the community? Does this match up with what's been done? Is this a long-term benefit to the county? So just to look at, I agree with what's been said, but in my opinion, our duty is to say, yes, this meets, or no, this doesn't meet.
And we did a comprehensive plan 7 or 8 years ago, whatever, a guy named, or longer than that, a guy named Paul Gressowitz was actually kind of coaching us. He'd been a planner all his life. And that, the same type of thing came up. And he said, if you have such an open public outcry against something, he said, you can't just ignore that.
I absolutely agree.
That's kind of where we're at.
No, but what I'm saying is I think we had a huge public outcry last time. And look, I was with them. I wouldn't want this different from my back door. If you're 1,000 or 1,500 feet, that's a big adjustment. They pulled it off the road. I mean, so like I said, I think they did a good job adjusting it and taking the considerations that were raised.
So basically what we're hearing from the people that aren't happy with it is that they can see it. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
That was a whole lot of it.
Yeah.
Some of it.
Basically, we're talking about a visual. We need better buffers. Do we need, what would satisfy these people that are going to have to see it?
Well, I talked to sorry, I didn't mean, I talked to some of those people and I don't care what you do. Some people are just not going to have it, but I do think there are others that are like, I don't want to see it. But
some people.
It's not necessarily all visual because on the one on Genito, when you're driving the post, it was extremely loud several miles away.
Yeah.
Well beyond 2 miles.
Yeah.
Several miles away.
On building it.
It shake the building.
And they don't stop at 6 o'clock because I leave the barn sometime at 8 o'clock. If it's still daylight, they trying to beat the rain. You hear that hammer, it's hitting pretty hard.
A lot of the people that call me is on the unknown. You can't see it now. Some of it may be blocked by Ralph Whitaker's property, Paul Whitaker's property or whatever. Who is to say 5 years, 10 years, they cut it. And it exposes something. You can't tell that until sometimes something is like that's gonna happen. I don't know how close y'all are to Josh Tanner's house, but I feel like he's in the middle of it, the closest, the one that impacted the most. Am I wrong on that at this point? Huh? You are? Oh, I'm voting off of, I have to, I live with these people. They're in my district. I'm right there with them. And, I don't know nothing about solar farms. I feel like we should have done this a while back. I just don't want to make the same mistake again. I'm not trying to be Mr. Negativity on solar farms, but when this thing happens, it's there. It ain't leaving. It's there.
For 35 years.
It is there and people are totally invested. I mean, worked their whole lives and have done built a house and they have it visualized how they want it at the end of the day, to the day they die, and an unknown comes. Now, it could be a solar farm, it could be a cell tower. Nobody knows that, but the solar farm is on the table at the moment. And it worries them. That's why I'm gonna be a hard one to please on this. As long as my phone rings, I don't see y'all every day, but I'll see them. No hard feelings against y'all, okay? But I live with these people. I go to church with them. They're my neighbors. And I'm fully invested in them. And I don't want them to, being in this position, they call me, I am their voice. See what I'm saying?
Every place that we come into, it's the exact same conversation. We gotta talk with these folks and have a meeting or not.
Josh.
That's part of us coming into your community, right?
I don't know, Josh Tanner has called me numerous times. I ain't gonna say you got to satisfy him. I don't know if he can be satisfied. I don't know how close he is. I'm just saying that is one, he's in the middle of it. I don't know how close y'all are to him now. Check him out then, okay? That's his home. His home. Where's your home at? Colorado? He might want to trade you. Talk to him,
Depending on how cold it is. Where in Colorado?
Always go to work.
Another good point you made was, and someone else made this too. Let's talk to the county, find out what they did right, find out what they did wrong. Find out what they wished they had done that they didn't do.
Yes.
I don't know what Power Hand has done, but they're going in over there like helicopters. But I know that, no.
People that are really upset are people in the northern Piedmont. That's the ones that got this legislation, behind this legislation.
Well,
Louise is banned anymore if we want to Louise again. We should first up.
Well, I think everybody had issues the first couple. I think, you got fly-by-nighters came in, put them up, sold them. I mean, I had a person come to me way back for theirs. He wanted me to put one in. And they will put it in, sell it. I didn't want a part of that. It was, everything. Well, there's motion on the floor to table it for 30 days. Think about it. For us to try to check around neighboring counties, see what may be going on, plus and minuses. Maybe answer the two questions Mr. Bradshaw asked me. Pros and cons. And I'm sure that information will be great for the board of supervisors to make a decision. But I think you got to go back. But I don't think we ought to put it past 30 days. We got to make a decision next month. But we also got, think Mr. Morris said too, it's, we've heard a lot of discussion and, go back to one, you don't make a decision on 20 minutes.
They satisfied a lot of people. I don't think it's a lot of people left too satisfied. Just throwing that out there, if you didn't have a big mob opposition up here today, it's a couple people that still impacts.
And I agree with you. I'm not arguing that point either. I think, you got
Putting it on that.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is too, the people talked, I've been on my farm, been on there for over 100 years. But age I'm getting at, I have two boys back and they have children and they probably carried on. But a lot of these people, do they have children even interested in the family farm anymore? I mean, I'd hope they are, but by just owning land, growing trees, I don't know if that's family farming, but I mean, when you get, two people, then there's 4 people, then there's 10 people. And then next thing you know, you got 100 people owning 2 acres of land and you can't even sell it. Because nobody will sign off on it. But you've heard the motion. It's been second. Any more discussion before we call and vote? All in favor of the motion, make it known by saying aye. And that's just to hold it for 30 days, make a decision in 30 days. So that'd be the next meeting, whatever it is in April. All right.
And I do think it's reasonable for us to ask Holly to contact some of these other localities that have been struggling with this and share with us some information on pros and cons. That's what that's what Roy is talking about. And I think that'd be useful to have a better outcome, to have that. Also, it gives this company a little more time to perhaps address the situation in, 2 or 3 circumstances. So they might have a minor adjustment or something.
All right.
Yeah, y'all look for the information over email. I'm not going to send out several different letters with all this stuff. So watch your emails and any information I get from other counties, I'm going to send it to you that way.
Okay. All right, the next one is the ordinance on campgrounds.
Do you want me to read all 3 of these and then do one public hearing for everything?
Might as well, they're pretty similar.
Okay. So like all the other ones I've done, all these are here for a purpose. Someone has contacted us wanting to do these things. So the first one is an amendment to add campgrounds as a use by special exception permit in A5 Ag, RP5 Rural Preservation, and RR3 Rural Residential Zoning Districts. Currently, campgrounds are not listed as a permitted use by right nor by special exception permit anywhere in the county. Only church campgrounds are allowed. We've had quite a few different people interested in doing this, so I'm proposing we add it to the ordinance so they could at least apply for a special exception permit to do that.
Most of these, the people that come in, are they off the main highway or they're off in Timbuktu?
Hang on out.
So it's kind of get you out in the country away from everything. Were they gonna put utilities and all that in?
Okay, so it's strictly in the rough. It's not
Yes.
water system, sewer
No, the
system.
one company that has contacted so far about doing a campground, they do just like treetop tent camping. But they only do like a max of 10. I'm assuming they probably have a pretty hefty insurance policy. But yeah, where they were proposing was pretty far out.
We just learned a lot of stuff like that. Maybe they can get it over the top of the solar panels.
Rocking and rolling, we got it.
All right.
All right, the next one is an amendment to the zoning ordinance to include detached dwelling units as a use by special exception permit in R1. R1 is the village and like 1 or 2 roads in Jetersville. It's the densest residential area, but right now they are not allowed to have detached dwelling units. So essentially garage apartments, that's what those normally are. They would have to have double the acreage that's required so that it could be legally subdivided if that ever had to happen. So all of those same requirements would apply as they do in all the other zoning districts that allow it. Questions about that one?
It's gonna, they gotta come to us if they want to do it.
That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, last one. An amendment to the zoning ordinance to include assembly halls as a use by special exception permit in RR3. Assembly halls, generally, we get them in the form of wedding venues. They're permitted by right in A5 and RP5, but with RR3 being that transitional zone between residential and commercial, I put it as a special exception permit because I think that area you're going to want to have some control over, especially if it's heavily residential or if it's an area that the county might want to use for future business or industrial growth. So that would give some control over that. So I know I just flew through those, but they're all fairly straightforward.
Or housekeeping than anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've heard all three. Is there any discussion before I open the public hearing? I now open the public hearing on the 3 amendments. Anyone like to speak? Yes, ma'am. State your name.
I don't know, it's right there.
It does not have anything to do with this, but if you catch me after, I do know what's going on with that property, so happy to share. Happy to share.
Anyone else like to speak on the 3 amendments? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Back to the board, planning commission.
Make a motion to approve all 3 of them.
Motion been made, is there a second? Any more discussion? Rushing through. Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, make a note by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All 3 amendments pass.
I want to know more about the treetop tent.
Supposed to be the first on the list. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
gonna put him in man bro.
Let me go play.
No way, that was good. I don't know the lady. I was wondering.
For a little while.
I don't know of any other things. Like I stated earlier, the zoning, we met and we'll probably hear something in a month or 2. We had to run everything through the lawyer. And we had like We looked at 3, 4 counties kind of surrounding us, kind of give an idea. And kind of came up with some things very similar to theirs. But other than that, I don't know of anything.
I have one more quick thing. Any of you all have been on social media, newspaper, anything, you may have seen that it's Renee Winfrey's last meeting.
Oh, that's right.
So starting April 1st, we have Jennifer Harris, and she will be filling that seat for us going forward.
Well, I will tell you, we will miss you.
And today's her birthday too.
I should know she.
It's 39.
Top 10.
So thank you for all your help. And,
Great.
and you feed everything that you got in your mind about the solar project into her mind.
I've read the 109 pages.
Yeah, she's on it.
I worked with them a lot.
She's on it.
All right, so we'll be glad to have you next month. And
That's why I was laughing kind of when you deferred it.
Yeah.
You don't want to go to rest.
so, but other than that, I don't know of anything else. I mean, we've had some other requests for solar farms, but nothing's going to be done for any others until we decide what we're going to do on this one. So.
Unless something changes by Thursday, that will be the only thing on the agenda for April. So see y'all there.
All right.
Right.
Have a good evening.
Oh. For next month, let be a public hearing on that too. I know I'm gonna have people ask me about it.
No.
It won't